Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith and welcome back to Diving Into DuckTales, where Kat Macberrie, Doug Macberrie, and I discuss each individual episode of the 2017 DuckTales series. I am joined once again by my good friend Kat Macberrie.
What's up?
And, of course, Doug Macberrie.
Hello.
Today we are discussing an episode that is honestly not the best. It's honestly probably one of the weakest of the entire series. Frankly, I enjoyed watching it. It wasn't exactly it wasn't exactly something that I want to watch again. And I feel like, if anything, it really, it felt like it cribbed a lot from the old DuckTales show, and in a bad way. But anyway, how's it going, Kat?
I'm I'm feeling a bit disappointed, honestly, with this episode too. like, I don't want to get down on the show, because it just started second season, but it's like we were built up so much in the first season, and for them to start off the second with an episode like this, or like a second episode like this, it just it leaves me disappointed. So I'm disappointed.
Yeah, like this episode. I'm not gonna say it's entirely bad, because I don't think it's like painful to watch. I don't think it's like anything super horrible, but like let's put it this way, like it's not something I'm gonna go out of my way to see again. And like it's not been a good week for me. I'm kind of sick at the moment, if you can tell via my voice. But this episode didn't help. This episode was not something that I really want to go out and seek again. And aside from like one bit that we're gonna get into, like I was underwhelmed. Doug, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much think exactly what you guys do. And to top it off, this one was like promoted as a Halloween episode, and I'm like, there are much different things you could have done in a Halloween episode. This just felt like any other episode. I don't know why you were like considering this one to be Halloween. Like, I would consider, McMystery at McDuck McManor a Halloween episode. I would consider the what you call it, the Terror of the Terra Firmians a Halloween episode. I'd even consider Mummies of Tothra maybe, like really pushing it, but I'd consider that, in the realm of Halloween. This one just didn't feel at all like Halloween. It felt like, at most, it's like one of those suspense movies where they have you like trapped in a small place, and you maybe get like claustrophobic and stuff, and you have a big monster. But yeah, what else about this really screams Halloween?
I mean, maybe I guess you can maybe tie it to Creature from the Black Lagoon, but they didn't go the horror route with this. And honestly, for a majority of the episode, we are primarily focused on something that is not Halloween related, that's not scary, and it just doesn't have the tone or feel of that. Like, and maybe you could say this is a reference to Devil, but no.
Honestly, this feels more like a shark film. When you think about it, people get trapped underwater with a giant creature going around that, like wants to kill them. Like, that's really more what it felt like.
It's like, maybe we should go over the plot before we get into any more of this. Kat, why don't you do the honors as per usual?
Sure. So, The Depths of Cousin Fethry is about when we meet Cousin Fethry. Huey and Dewey get a call from a can on Scrooge's desk, and it's from their cousin Fethry, who happens to work at a sea lab far out in the ocean that Scrooge, had built a long time ago. Scrooge, of course, wants nothing to do with Fethry, saying that every time he calls them, he brings them over there for pretty much no reason and puts them in danger in the process. Well, of course, the boys take that as an opportunity to think, oh, this is going to be a great adventure. We'll see some new scientific discovery, or we'll find something awesome. And yeah, it goes about as well as you expect.
They build this up in the episode to be some sort of really big adventure, something really enjoyable. And yeah, Scrooge and Donald warn them that it's not worth pursuing, but they still build it up, and then there's no payoff. Like, everything past, like, the first 5 minutes is very underwhelming, and, like, from the moment you see Cousin Fethry, I could see where they were going with this, and I was not happy.
Yeah, pretty much Cousin Fethry is another, relative of the duck family that, you very rarely hear about. And the reason for this is because Cousin Fethry is more of an invention from the European Donald Duck comics as opposed to the Americanized version. Like, this is honestly the first time he's ever appeared in animation ever, even in the old cartoons. And from what I researched about him, like, his whole thing is that, he's an eccentric beatnik. Like, he's had, like, random careers and had, like, odd hobbies and did, like, things here. Like, his characterization isn't really consistent from what I've found. Like, sometimes he'll be proud of being weird, and sometimes he'll be, like, he'll just, like, be doing his own thing, or he'll be, like, an annoyance to people, and it's just, Like, with this episode, like, they try to make him, a likable eccentric, but at the same time, like, he just feels off, and it's like, you're waiting for him to do something, like, really, truly crazy, but he never quite goes that far. Like, granted, he does take them down to the bottom of the ocean for, at first, seems like no real reason, but then it turns out to be a really big reason, and it almost gets them killed.
Yeah, it's almost like a red herring in a sense, because throughout the entire episode, they build up, like, this really big thing that's lurking in the bottom of the ocean, and they make it seem like, oh, there's this big terror and danger, and it turns out to be very underwhelming. But Cousin Fethry himself is, I think, one of my main points, because it seems like they're trying to do a message of, just because you're nerdy or weird or eccentric doesn't mean that you're not useful or a really cool person. This message not only has been done to death, but it has been done better so many times, to the point where they really did not do a good job nailing what it means to have someone eccentric but very, very useful. And I think the best example of this is, you guys remember the All Grown Up episode where Grandpa Lou took them on a tour of a museum?
Was that like the inside of the human body sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I kind of remember that one.
Very vaguely.
Like, the whole point of that episode was Grandpa Lou was getting very old, and Tommy wanted to show how much of a hero that Lou was to him, and how much, like, he kept building up his grandpa as, like, the greatest, and it turned out, like, there are some really weird, eccentric, and lame things about him, and a lot of people were not happy about that. But when the chips were down and he and his friend were trapped inside the heart exhibit, Grandpa Lou saved him. I think that's a great example of how you can make a character with, reasonable eccentricities and problems into a badass hero at the end of the day. Here, they try to go that route, but they never really succeed. But before I go on, Doug, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Cousin Feathery's very bland himself, and he's basically like kind of this, you know, at first you see like Huey kind of looking up to him because they're so much alike. I mean, both of them like pull out the Junior Woodchuck guide in sync and read it, at the same exact time. And then even like Huey's kind of getting a little uncomfortable by just how nerdy he is. And it's like, and he's kind of creepy too. Yeah, like when they first meet him, he's like, "I like your hat," and I'm like, "Okay, this is who we're going to be spending the entire episode with." I'm like, I kind of wish, if anything, we'd gotten to see more of the Sea Lab before it gets, destroyed in the eruptions. But as it is, it's like, it's one of those, they tell instead of show. Like, they basically tell everything that these are, but, we're not going to get to see inside except for, like, one building, and it's only, his room.
Yeah, it's like we never get a chance to see inside the lab, and part of me wishes that this episode was more like the Doctor Who episode where Tennant went up into space and the space colony. We got to see it in operation before it was destroyed by the monster of the week type of thing. Hell, that would actually make for more terror than what we got, because there was no actual danger. Even when they were like attacked by eels, they just said, "Oh, the solution was telling the eels I love you."
Yeah, they basically ripped off the scene from Harry Potter in the first novel / movie where they get caught in the devil's snare, and the only way they could get out of it was by relaxing. Like, that's pretty much what it felt like.
Yeah, which does not make any sense, because, yeah, like, there are certain plants that react a certain way, but, like, it just, to me, it rubs me the wrong way. I never liked that in the book, I never liked that in the movie, and I still don't like it here, and it just contributes to a lot of the problems. Another thing that really took me out of it from the very beginning was when he came up and he's just like, "Oh, I'm just adjusting from the pressure of the depths." And they kind of make it seem like the pressure has gone to his head. Never comes up in the episode again, especially when they go from a very deep area that's supposedly under pressure, with like, they have diving suits, but still the pressure doesn't affect them.
Yeah, I was questioning that too, and he's like, "Oh, well, the elevator has been the line has been severed. We're gonna have to get out and swim." I'm like, isn't that gonna crush your lungs? Like, that made no sense to me. And it's like, and it's weird because from what I heard, they actually did get a scientist to consult, like with all the scientific data they presented in this episode, like in terms of like how the krill work and how like an undersea lab would work and everything. They actually got like legit sources for this, but nobody pointed out to them that, hey, humans can't swim at that depth because it would kill them.
And especially ducks. Especially ducks.
Yeah, like, God.
and go on.
No, go ahead.
That just raises, I think, the big issue I have with several points of the episode: inconsistency. There's an inconsistent tone, an inconsistent pacing, and an inconsistent, like, okay, we're gonna bring up this problem, and it's not a problem anymore. Like, they bring up the pressure from the deep, not a problem at the end of it. They bring up certain things, but it's not an issue later on. They bring up them stealing the sub. They bring up them stealing the sub, and they never deal with it.
They just said they'll find a way to blame it on Louis.
Oh, okay. I get, like, there are setups. There's a lot of setup to things that we do not get a payoff for, and it just really irks me, because it feels like it feels like there's an episode in here. It definitely does feel like there's an episode that could be made with, like, something underwater that they run from, that, like, there's a real threat and they have to deal with, and they have to, like, you can make this a Dead Space. Like, just make this the Dead Space episode, but underwater. And then it would be a lot more interesting, like, you know, have underwater zombies or something. It feels like there's so much wasted and untapped potential. And we'll get to my main thing I wish the episode was about in a second. But do you have anything to add to that, Doug?
One thing that I mean, basically I was thinking the entire time, you know, why the hell isn't the pressure crushing them and, you know, killing them in horrible ways? But, you know, yeah, it's basically what you've said has been said. But another thing that was really bothering me is, like, how he, you know, mentioned how Scrooge, you know, put that whole lab together and everything, and how he, you know, asked him, you know, to I guess, maintain it better or whatever. So it's like, you have to wonder, did Scrooge want to continue operations on that? Or was he just, you know, looking for an excuse to get Fethry out of the way and hope that it would kill him in the end?
I feel like, you know, because they mentioned that he made the base back in 1964, which coincidentally was the same time that Walt Disney was building Disney World. So I feel like this is supposed to be like Scrooge's version of like an amusement park or something, somewhere, you know, where some people of scientific minds could gather and, you know, study things from the deep and everything, but it ended up not working out. And then, of course, you know, Fethry being the way he is, you know, he probably like irked Scrooge at some point, and Scrooge probably thought the best way to like get him out of the way was to give him, you know, the task of maintaining this site that nobody goes to anymore. So, you know, that's the best thing I can think of, because the whole area is deserted. We never see anybody else, you know, aside from like random sea life. So
Yeah, we don't see anyone down there. And another thing that is kind of inconsistent. You did mention that he was brought down to maintain the site, but he also says during the episode, I told Scrooge that we need to make repairs to all of this and stuff like that. Like,
well, it kind of adds to, you know, my theory that he just stuck Fethry there to get him out of the way, not to really do any upkeep, because he knew that, you know, given that the site was built on, you know, an area with volcanic activity, it was doomed to fall apart eventually. Which kind of is also messed up, because that means that Fethry could have well been trapped down there when the whole lab, you know, broke apart, which meant he could have died and it would have been Scrooge's fault. That's kind of messed up.
Yeah, that's this whole thing is just weird. It's weird and disappointing. Okay, so we have two more things that I think we should discuss in the episode. One is the actual, like, creature. Because the entire point of the episode is that they go down, there's a creature underneath the ocean, and they have to deal with it. And the entire episode is built around somewhat the tension that this creature is trying to kill them, and they have to they have to find a way to fight it or get around it. And they do set up earlier in the episode that there's these glow-in-the-dark krill that Fethry have that light his way, and they have, like, special, like, rainbow colors and whatnot, and that's the whole reason he brought them down to see it. The setup is fine. The payoff is a little bit cliche, because it turns out that the creature of the deep that has been, you know, supposedly destroying the lines and all this other stuff has been a giant mutated krill that was mutated by the thermal toxic vents. I have several questions. One, who severed the line to the bathysphere? Because they made it seem like the krill did, but then the krill was supposed to help them later on in the episode. And then they make it like they imply maybe it's the thermal vents, but because they say, oh, he was trying to help us the whole time, but thermal vents can't do that. I don't think.
I didn't think so either, because I assume the vents again were from like volcanic activity that goes on within the within, because I think they were in the Atlantic Rift or something like that. But I didn't think that was like capable of like causing mutations like that. I mean, I figured if anything, like something from the lab that might have been experimented on there long ago might have leaked into the water, and that's what caused the mutation. I mean, that would have made more sense. But it's just like, oh, she just got mutated from all the minerals released from the vents, and I'm like,
And if
I
that's
don't know
the
if that's how that
case,
works.
yeah, if that's the case, why was it only one krill that got mutated? Shouldn't, more of the krill gotten mutated as well as, any other, deep sea life that was hanging around?
Why isn't Feathery mutated? Why is only one krill if it is the toxic vents, which or something leaking into the ocean? Like, none of this makes sense to me. None of this meshes together, and it's like it's almost like they were trying to do an underwater Godzilla, but without the reason for like Godzilla is a result of the Bikini Atoll testing on a very specific site, and everything else there was mutated as well. Godzilla was just one of the creatures, but here we just have one mutated krill that's not angry, and turns out to be friendly, and is trying to help them, but is attacking only because they're blinding him with the light, even though they were not doing this beforehand, but it was still chasing them violently and destroying stuff. Like, just nothing adds up. The payoff and the build-up do not connect. There's no cohesion between these two plot points, and if they were trying to set this up before, I'm gonna call bullshit, because this did not this is not a good reveal in the sense that it's like it does not feel like it was planned the entire time.
You know what, I'm surprised what route they didn't go with in terms of Feathery. Like, why didn't they make it so that he went full out insane, like like evil insane? Like, the whole reason he called Scrooge down is because he had been like actually like feeding the krill like some of like the toxic residue from some scientific experiment, and they started to go haywire, and he calls them to help him like get it under control, but his obsession with the krill ends up leading to like them to almost be killed.
That
Something
would
like
be
that.
that would be really cool, because then you'd have not only like a James Bond type villain, like you could have a callback to Shush, and be like, oh, I was supposed to be in the League of Villains with Black Heron, but no, they wouldn't let me in. They said they called me mad. They called me crazy. Well, who's mad now? Like, do something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, granted, it's not the most original of concepts, but it definitely would have been way more interesting to watch than just some like slightly crazy guy with good intentions just leading people, his family, into unnecessary danger.
Yeah, like the whole message of like, yeah, he's eccentric but he's cool, it does not mesh with anything. It does not work. It does not feel like it's earned. And when they surface at the end of the episode, because the bathysphere is destroyed, but they get in their diving suits and they surface with the krill. Again, they're not exploded with the pressure. They're not crushed. I don't understand this, but they go to the surface, and first of all, Cousin Feathery decides that he wants to be a scientist now, because he was a janitor before, so he wants to be a scientist now. He doesn't know what a scientist is, but he wants to be a scientist now, and he rides off on the giant krill eccentrically into the sunset, and we're supposed to find it charmingly weird. No, this entire sequence, I was rolling my eyes. I was waiting for the episode to end.
Yeah, honestly, I spaced out at times throughout the episode, like, because it like took them forever to get down there, and then it took forever to get to like the monster reveal, and it just, up until like they were trying to escape from it, like that whole sequence was just so slow, and then the ending just like was so fast. It just, the pacing is a real problem in this. Honestly, like, because I get what the moral was about how having eccentricities isn't bad and everything, but I felt they could have gone in the opposite direction, showing that, eccentricities are okay, but obsession is not. Like, they could have had it that, Fethry was obsessed with the krill or something, and it showed, what it did to him and all that. I felt that was a better direction they could have gone in.
There just seemed to be a lot of things that they could do with this episode, but they didn't take it in a good direction, and it's not exciting, it's not interesting, it's not enjoyable. Before we move on to the final point of the episode where I really need to rage, Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
Pretty much what you've said, I could pretty much say ditto too. I definitely was kind of zoning out a couple times. Like, I knew I had to rewatch this just to see if I missed anything. And, like, I was dreading it. I was, like, kind of kept putting it off and forgetting about it. I mean, I did rewatch it, and I did notice something, like, when they first go down and they see, like, in the shadows, they see the eyes of the krill. So, I mean, like, that much I noticed the second time around. But yeah, I mean, other than that, there's just really nothing for the, redeemable about this episode, with the exception of two things. One being Dewey and how he keeps trying to come up with names for, potential names for the creature that they're gonna see. And then Launchpad, again, going off on a side quest that we don't get to see. And, like, coming back, with, like, random stuff.
Like, looking like Aquaman.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, they need to make an episode that's, like, centered around just his side quests. Like, they either need to do an anthology of the episodes, that were concurrent with, the House of the Lucky Gander and this episode, or, just one episode where, it's just a focus on him.
I do agree about the Dewfish. I liked them trying to name it to mixed success, and them showing like an actual dewfish and how lame it looks, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty fitting. But Launchpad is the one thing that I really need to rage about, because it is truly the best part of the episode. Him going on a side quest to a former, like, lover in Atlantis or whatever, and, it's the same thing as, like, in the House of the Lucky Gander, where I want to know more. I need to know more. But the problem is, the episode that it's contained within is so bland and just uninteresting. Why wasn't this episode about Launchpad going to Atlantis?
Yeah, that would have been amazing. I would have definitely paid to have watched that.
Like, every single bit with Launchpad in this episode works. It is on point, it is fun, it is hilarious as usual. Like, there's nothing I can complain about with Launchpad. And so, like, when I got down to thinking about this episode, how it could improve, I'm just like, make this episode about Launchpad. Instead, you don't even have to get the boys in on it. You could have the Launchpad just, testing out the sub and going on his own adventure, and maybe do another follow-up on the Z from the House of the Lucky Gander, because we never learned about that either. And it's a funny joke. It is a funny joke that we don't know what's going on, and we come back and he's had this big adventure. I agree. I think it's a fun premise, a fun joke, but you need to have a good episode built around it so we don't want to watch his adventures instead.
You know what would have been funny if it turns out that the whole reasoning behind the giant krill was actually related to his adventure? Like the creature came from Atlantis, and he was like fighting it and everything, and drew it off, or he accidentally created the monster and lost track of it. And then when he like meets up with the boys again, and he's like, "So what do you guys do in your adventure?" And they point to the krill, and he's just like, "Huh, that's where that went." Like that would be funny.
It feels.
And it would explain a lot.
It would explain a lot. Like, I don't know. I feel like Launchpad is the main character here. When they're trying to focus on Dewey and the rest of like Fethry's adventures, I'm like, I want to know more about what Launchpad is doing. I always want to know more about what Launchpad is doing. I don't know if he could carry an entire episode by himself because a lot of his shtick relies on others. But introduce new characters, make them interesting. It could work. I want anything more than what we got in this episode. I'm sorry, guys. I really am. But this is the low point for me. Compare like. We had a good first episode. It wasn't like amazing or mind blowing, but it was good.
We were actually interested in what was going on.
This is skippable. Mm-hmm. Like there's no point in this episode that you need to watch it. It is primarily filler.
Yeah, honestly, the real crime in all this is, the waste of Tom Kenny. Because the only reason they brought him in for this part because of who he voices.
Don't say it.
Who lives in the sea, lives under the sea. He even shows up at the beginning like with a sponge. It's like, how on the nose can you possibly get?
You know what they should have made the villain? They should have made the villain the Dirty Bubble and have a callback to the previous episode on the other island where we had the not Dirty Bubble. I know it's a reference to the British television series, but it's the Dirty Bubble.
I don't know. I just know, because it's a shame because Tom Kenny, he is a good voice actor despite, his most prominent role. Like, he can play crazy characters. I mean, look at Ice King. He voices him wonderfully. It's just, you think that would translate well into this character. Is supposed to be sort of like crazy, kooky, eccentric, but he's just kind of bland, and it's such a shame. Like, I really don't want to discount Tom Kenny for this, but I actually blame the writers more than anything, because, look what he has to, work with. It's really not fair.
Even Ice King has depth to him. Ice King is super eccentric, super fun, and there, you might think that there's not a lot to him, but they do delve into that, and I just, this does feel like they were trying to go for that type of character that's eccentric but has something to him, but no, it doesn't work. It really doesn't, because what does Cousin Fethry add to this episode that, somebody else could have added to this episode? It just, it feels like, you know what it felt like to me when I first saw him? God, I'm forgetting his name, but the eccentric millionaire that they met in that previous, 3-part episode.
Oh, Doofus Drake.
It really felt like they, the insane, crazy guy. I was expecting him to go nuts, like what happened to them in that episode. And I mean, granted, nothing does happen, thankfully, but the whole episode, I was getting very bad vibes, and just no. So that was today's episode. Before we get into final thoughts, I mean, I hear the next episode involves Glomgold. So I'm like, unfortunately we're recording this a little bit late because I was sick most of this week, and other things happened, but I have heard that Glomgold is involved, and anything is better with Glomgold. So if that's the case, then I'm going to be extremely happy. And this episode does not make me, look back at the previous season and say, oh, like it's any lesser. No, the first season is still amazing. Every show has their weak episodes. This is just a weak point. I'm looking forward to next week. Again, before we get into final thoughts, what do you think, Kat?
Yeah, I don't like this episode. Even having watched it twice, I still forgot a lot of what went on. And, I get that they're trying to incorporate stuff from like the other comics. So, like, I know the Cousin Fethry is real big in like Brazil and Europe and all that, but it just, I don't know, his character just doesn't translate well here. Because, like, compare him to Donald or Scrooge or even Gladstone. Like, he's just, he's just a bland addition, and I just don't care for his character. Their adventure, is not all that exciting, and doesn't have the best of payoffs, and the moral was just predictable. And yeah, this episode was just blah. Like, with the only highlight being Launchpad's thing. Although I will say, like, I did notice they kind of tease us again with a potential future crossover. Because in the scene where you see Scrooge's desk, where he has all these phones and stuff that are attached to, like, different cities and whatnot, you see he actually has like a thing for Cape Suzette, which again adds to my theory that we will eventually get a Cape Suzette, like a Tailspin crossover, which I'm really, really hoping for. But again, this is just like a tease, so that kind of like adds to the frustration of this episode.
And I do want that. Like, I want them to. I do like the nods and little like asides to certain things like Cape Suzette and stuff like that. I want them to do more with them, like more crossovers. Yeah, we got Sky Pirates in the Sky. We got the main villain. It that was great. But I would like a little bit more. I would like, maybe the characters to show up from that or something like that. Or give me Darkwing Duck, please. Like, not in TV show form. Give me like actual Darkwing Duck, please.
Yeah, that would be nice. But again, we don't know what they have planned, so the most we can do is just speculate at this point.
All right. My final thoughts. This episode is 100% skippable. There's only one part in the episode that I really feel like, you kind of need to see the clip for it, and that's the stuff with Launchpad. But aside from that, aside from his like little adventure, I felt like this episode was wholly skippable, not worth watching. And it's just it's a bottle episode done wrong. It's an episode that the House of the Lucky Gander managed to do this fine. Why are you doing it this specific way? It doesn't intrigue me. It doesn't capture my attention throughout the entire episode. I was spacing off. And the moral is all over the place. There's a lot of problems with pacing, and there's a lot of contradictions. And the whole episode, I was just saying, of course, don't you know anything about science? Like, no, they don't know anything about science here at all. Nobody in this episode actually knows anything about science, including Cousin Fethry. So, yeah, I don't like it.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
Doug, what are your final thoughts on the episode?
Definitely skip. Yeah, I mean, like we said, really, the only thing that makes it at all worth watching is, the Launchpad side quest. But aside from that, it's like, yeah, just skip it. This episode was like, normally, you're supposed to have the what's the phrase that I'm looking for? Like, wow, I'm blanking on it, but it's like you have to not you have to kind of not think about the logic in it, and it's like it's really taking me out of it, and we are having too many questions. So it's like, yeah, when you try to do that stuff, it's like, no, then you've got a failure. You just stop.
Like, the worst part is that it's just so bland. There's not enough to talk about. I've been trying to think of anything to latch onto, and there's nothing. There's nothing. How did they make this a full runtime of an episode? It doesn't even feel like it's so padded. It's so drawn out. Kat, final thoughts?
I can't defend this. Like, honestly, I wouldn't. We should have just waited and like combined this review with the Most Dangerous Game Night, given the amount of stuff to talk about. Like, but yeah, that's skippable, totally skippable, and just. Oh, I hope it gets better from here. Like, I really do hope the Glomgold episode, like, improves upon this. I mean, we're going to see what happened with, like, Webby and Louie while the other two are away, so it should hopefully be interesting. I hope.
It's Glomgold, though, so it
Is it? Because I read the description of the next episode, and, yeah, something interesting happens with Glomgold. It might not be Glomgold. You'll see what I mean, because the title is The Ballad of Duke Baloney.
But it's always Glomgold.
And it's always what'll be!
Anyway, guys, I apologize. This episode was just a lackluster bit of the show, and hopefully we'll have a bit more to talk about next time. Anyway, I am Zenith Rule.
I'm Kat Macberrie.
I'm Doug Macberrie.
And we just want to let you know that if you're trying to make an episode that involves science and you bring a scientist on board, you better have good science.
Hey, this is Megami33. Thank you for watching Zenith Will Review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. If you like what you see, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/ZenithWillReview.